election at Bomas. We'll keep checking on them, see if your numbers are being counted, because that's what it's about. Philip Kisaka, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Philip is an advocate of the High Court. This is a day you're supposed to interpret in terms of the work you do. But let me start by, where did you vote?
I voted in Kakamega County, a constituency called Likuyani.
Today?
Yes, and I was there by 6 a.m. so that I also just try and make it here on time.
You were in Kakamega early?
Yes, I was early in Kakamega.
Now we're in Nairobi?
Yes.
Explain that to me. What is this urgency of going across town to vote and come back to the city? Why not just vote in Nairobi?
I mean, also because we've seen this as a trend by the president, the deputy president, and most politicians where they decide most of the time to vote from their home counties because then they want to really participate in choosing leaders who will shape the politics at the home county level. This is where most people will go back home to retire. This is where most people will die and be buried. So following from that trend, then I decided to also just retain my vote back in my home county, where I've been a voter since I started voting.
So actually it's true, the legacy begins at home.
Correct.
Not in Nairobi.
Correct.
You've done several elections. You've been there for several. I know this is not the first time you're voting.
This is not the first time, but not several. Do I look that old?
But it's not your first time.
Yes.
What stands out for you this time?
The organization this time has been meticulous. I was at the polling station by 5:30 a.m. The voting process started at 6 a.m. Apart from some trouble with the KIMS kits, I mean, back in the village, you know, from the nature of work they do most of the time, they tend to lose their fingerprints, their visibility most of the time. So a lot of problems were occasioned due to that. But other than that, everything was smooth, everything was flowing.
Actually, that brings us to the clarity of the timing. People are asking, is it on the clock that they open and shut the polling station, or is it dependent on the people who've shown up at that time?
So in terms of opening, then they only open it at 6 a.m., but in terms of closing, they'll close it at 5 p.m., but they will not lock out any person who's within the polling station by 5 p.m., sorry.
Right, you were in Kakamega?
Yes, Kakamega
Tell
County.
me, was there a problem? Were people complaining about the fact that they cannot vote for the governor this time?
Yeah, I mean, from the particular polling station I was in, many citizens actually were made aware of not voting for the governor in the morning when they came to the polling station to vote. So I feel like there was a lot of no flow of communication to these people in a way that would get to them in a timely manner in terms of not voting for the governor. But nonetheless, some of them vowed to try, come back and vote once that is gazetted by the IEBC. However, some of them say that they cannot stop business for 2 consecutive times in order to just get someone into office. As someone would say, tumeacha kazi kupatia mtu kazi.
There is a lot of expectancy on what the leader is supposed to do. Is there education to that? Has there been enough of it? Do you think there's enough information to tell people why they're voting, why it's important?
I think this year also the IEBC has tried, but it is work in progress. It is very progressive because the electorate will most of the time think that a mheshimiwa or an elected person is a person who's there having been elected to give you handouts. That is why the trend is there. Mostly when a mheshimiwa, an MP or MCA shows up, the first thing is he going to give us money? Is he going to give us facilitation to get to these places? And this was also an issue today, I know, across the country, where most people did not turn up to polling stations that were a bit far from their homes, because then they expected the heshimiwas or the people they were voting in to actually facilitate their movement. So I feel like it's an area that is lacking. And not just by government. I feel like the civil society should also come in and just help out to reach out to these people and explain to them all about who a leader is and what their duty is.
We've talked about this for a long time. So you're saying up until now, there are a lot of citizens who still look at their MP as Father Christmas.
Correct. Yeah, and you even see the recent issue with the Supreme Court now sort of illegalizing the CDF and saying that
that is going to be a problem.
Yes, the role of an MP is to oversight. And this is going to take a very huge budget away from the MPs. So I don't know what is going to be their bargaining chip when campaigning in future campaigns. But it will also now empower the citizen to understand that no, this person was actually for us, or this person just wanted to be in control of the CDF funds, and now that they're not at their disposal, then they have no business being in office.
Well, legally speaking, and just in terms of institution, in terms of process and order, do you agree with the decision?
I totally agree in terms of, first of all, separation of powers, because you find that the MPs would now end up legislating on how much the CDF should be. You find another issue that arose from the decision. I've not gone into depth in reading it, but one of the issues that was coming up was in terms of in terms of funding, the principles of, I forget the exact term, but it was really to do with the legislators cannot, they themselves, allocate the money that they want to go spend at the constituency level and then utilize it as a bargaining chip.
Why did this just come suddenly? Why is this a new revelation now? And we've known about their behavior for years. We know this has been an area of contention for years. Is it in order for a decision like that to come on the eve of elections?
I mean, we cannot know why it was that sudden. Again, it's a decision by the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court does not have sort of a specific day or date that they should give or should not give a judgment or ruling. So I sort of do not read any mischief into it, but it is a very welcome decision in my opinion.
Now that takes us down to for the Christmas dependents. What's going to happen to them? Because that's going to be even harder.
I mean, then it just shows that we are now moving into a more progressive democracy where any person moving into this position would be moving into a position in order to help the citizens rather than to benefit from it.
Yeah. Because if we have people lining up now, waiting for him, that's a cost.
Yes, correct.
And he's going to take that money knowing he's going to get it back.
Yes, through the CDF.
What is going to happen? What was your scene when you went back home, Kakamega and all that? What were they saying?
I mean, again, most people do not even know about this decision because it was, I think, made 3 days ago, I think on Monday. So not many people understand that now the CDF has been removed from one of the mandates of the MP. So it will be very interesting to see, because I know most people on the queuing line were saying things like, I'm voting for this Mheshimiwa. I hope he will not deny me CDF funds when I go, or I hope he will invest more in terms of CDF funds in our ward and what have you. So most people are not yet aware that this has now moved away from a mandate of the MP and back to the respective organizations.
In the city, the argument can hold. You know that. But if they don't know that where you voted, it means all they have to do is go back and issue a protest and say, we've been robbed. I would have done 1, 2, 3, but I can't. They've taken the money away. Because if the education is not yet there, how do you think they're going to present themselves to the locals?
I mean, we have to give it time. It's a decision that has just been made. So within the next 5 years, we'll see how the Mheshimiwas morph into something different. But one thing I know for sure is that we'll now be seeing more of their oversight role and more of their lawmaking role in Parliament. So speaking up in debates, sponsoring bills, and what have you.
You asked for the civil society because now we're talking about decisions that are being made, and you can now be a witness that it's not going down. It doesn't permeate down to the voter. Where is the disconnect?
I mean, the disconnect is for a very long time, the voter has felt helpless. I mean, we've seen elections in Kenya in the past not going as most would expect, either from poll opinions or from the general feeling of the public. And so for the longest time, the voter has always felt like, I'm casting my vote, but will it really count? These guys will end up doing their own processes, either rig or have whichever candidate they want. But I feel like there's a changing pattern or trend that the IEBC has really tried to establish in terms of systems all the way from the polling station to the constituency level by the returning officer to the national level.
What's the most interesting conversation you had when you were in Kakamega from your fellow community members?
Utilization of technology. They are very excited to know that they could now verify their could now verify their voting stream primary school by the click of a button. You just enter your name, your ID number and your year of birth, and then you're able to know that I'm voting from this primary school and at this stream. So it was interesting to see even some locals try make some few shillings out of it. Yeah, and tell, I mean, those, you know, Mlika Mwizi, the very, the utility phones are the most used down there. So you'd find someone with a smartphone and they would be saying, bundles are not free, so come I check for you, you're at stream number 3, number 2. But nonetheless, those lists were already printed and they had been placed strategically around the school. But it was just interesting to see the embrace of technology and how the electorate was also eager to not have their fingerprints not recognized by the KIMS kids.
Which gave rise to another controversy again.
Correct.
Digital versus the manual register.
Yeah,
what do you think of that?
I still think that use of the manual register was and is not necessary by the mere fact that there is a secondary procedure in case all your fingerprints fail. And this is where the KIMS kit will now prompt the clerk to take a photo of you holding your ID below the chin, and then you'll fill, is it form 32A, which is a voter identification form. And then after doing that procedure, you'll be given your papers for your voting papers for all the contestants. Then you'll be able to now vote. The only downside of that is that it takes a bit of time. So you'd find you're averaging 10 minutes per voter. But I think the two processes complement each other, because then you have the voter, at any given point you're assured that the voter is at the polling station, either identified by biometrics, or secondly by the second procedure where now a photo is being taken with your holding your ID below the chin and you're filling this form 32A.
So in effect we need both?
Yeah, ideally not both, because this is not manual, it is a hybrid kind of thing. Because when I hear manual,
we're saying we cannot just depend on one method.
Correct, correct.
Whether it is manual or digital, we need a backup.
Yeah, correct. I mean, technology fails all the time, network issues and what have you. So we actually need both.
That is also a problem to some people, because when they went to the polling stations early this morning, they were told exactly that. We can't start, there is no network. How do we deal with that?
I mean, again, we move away from government so much, and we talk about the telco providers. They also need to at least invest more in network connectivity throughout the country, so as to enable the IEBC also smoothly carry out its operations. Because I know the IEBC is not in the business of raising boosters here and there. They would most definitely rely on infrastructure that is already existing. So it will just be a matter of partnering with these telcos and telling them that we anticipate we have this number of polling stations in these regions. Kindly could we partner to increase the connectivity and also have more dry runs and more tests in the future. 1 year, 2 years to elections, to just understand the network situation in these areas so that we have less of this as we go by.
Did you go by road to Kakamega?
Yes, I went
by... What did you notice? What did you notice?
I went by road. I noticed the roads were very clear for the very first time. Of course, with the occasional Western travelers with their sofa sets or mattresses. Of course, not me included. Yeah, and I also noticed that there was, I think, the flights were fully booked to and from Eldoret, from Kitale. You could notice that there's been a shift. And I think people traveled before. I traveled on Monday. I think people traveled way before, probably Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because the roads were quite clear to and even coming back today.
Well, some of these are a twist, because I asked you that because for the first time we're enjoying no traffic in Nairobi after a long time. Although the reason is not a good one, but you can get anywhere in 15 minutes now. But a lot of people, yes, have traveled and they've gone to do what they need to do. Then again, there's a large number of people who've gone to the hills because of all this tension that has come up with the controversies regarding who's supposed to do what. And a lot of these comments have just built up tension. And some people have raided the supermarkets and gone to the bank. What would you tell them? I
would tell them that I think we have come a long way as a country. And such actions, especially by leaders, because I've seen a lot of posts that have not been verified by leaders, would just move to cause unnecessary tension and panic. I know many people thought that when Kakamega and Mombasa were cancelled, then there would be an uproar, there would be chaos. But I think we have tried to mature up as a democracy, and I feel like people shouldn't panic as much, because this would be a very peaceful election. I would be tempted to say that without fear of any doubt, because of the processes and where we have come from as a country.
I would share that. And what would you tell the people who are anticipating by tomorrow we'll start having solid results?
I mean, I tell them that let's be expectant. I've seen the results come in. I know the media houses such as yourself, you also have an API into the result transmission portal. And I know the transmission of the results all the way from the PO to the arrow in the constituency level, to the presidential arrow at Bomas. The process has been made very seamless and very transparent. Just to speak a bit on it, all the way from the PO level, we are having them take photographs with the KIMS kits of the Form 34A, that is for the presidential, for the presidential poll, and then for the rest, and transmitting it into the IBC API into the public API where media houses can access. We also have them printing this and putting them in a visible place at the polling stations, where any person can know that at this polling station, at this stream, this is how they voted, these are the number of cast votes, polled votes, and these are the number of votes for each candidate. I also know there was a miscommunication, I think, with IBC, and they ended up printing 2 booklets per post, so for the presidential vote and for the other aspirants. And I know that was a question that one of the teams really tried to ask, and they were saying that now that we have 2 booklets from 34A, 35A, 36A, then what happens? So I know one of the procedures that have been put in place is that you're only using 1 booklet, the first booklet, and you're sealing the second booklet, and it has to be delivered as an election material back to the returning officer at the constituency level.
Do you remember the most famous form for the last election? What was it?
34A.
Why?
I mean, it's a presidential form all the way
People
from...
got their names from that form. People call it 34A.
I mean, yeah, in specific parts of the country, not mentioning any specific region, but then 34A is done by the PO and 34B by the returning officer, who then transmits it to the presidential arrow, who is the chair of IBC. However, they cannot announce the results until all the arrows have transmitted. They're from 34Bs after aggregating 34As at the constituency level. So
we probably should get ready to start hearing maybe MCAs first to begin with. Those are easy to deal with. Yes, I mean, like my ward has, I think, 5,000 voters. So probably by now, by midday, I know that the lines had subsided. So by 5 p.m., I know they closed down, and probably they're counting, and we'll be receiving reports as they come in. Yeah, because is there an ideal time for these numbers to come in and to give the big announcement? Is there an ideal time, or is it dependent on a lot of variables? Of course. The first variable is the network, as we've talked about it. But the second variable is also what time voting stops. Because we've said that as long as you're within the polling station by 5 p.m., you'll be allowed to vote. What happens to polling stations that began voting late? I know as late as midday, there are some polling stations in the central region that had not yet started voting. So what happens to such situations? And, you know, we need to wait for all this to also come in. Because it will form, again, the 34A that will go to the constituency, to form 34B that has to go to the national arrow. So without that whole chain, then we will not be having, we won't be having all results coming at the same time. In your opinion, is it by default or is it by design that some of these huge blocking votes, when you look at the numbers that come in, the areas where we expect huge numbers, they always come in last and turn the whole election around. Is that by default or design?
I don't think it's by design because, as you've just said, huge voting blocks. So again, a lot goes into counting, a lot goes into tallying, and then moving these votes to the constituency level. So I think it's a matter of logistics rather than by design.
Because by now, if you start looking at the numbers that come in, that's not the vote. It goes upside down in, 6 hours?
Correct.
Day
yeah.
3. So it's not by default.
In my opinion, not as an IEBC official, it's not by default.
Okay, tell me the things you're looking out for. Now, just an observer and in the position you're in legally, what are the things you'll be looking out for?
So the first thing, as an observer, I would be looking out for the Form 34As and all other original forms being transmitted in the original form, and without any doctoring. I was about to say much doctoring, without any doctoring, because you look at the 34A, the agents at the polling station will also remain with a carbonated copy. There's also one carbonated copy that will go up to the constituency level. So just having all these 34As corresponding and saying this is original, this is a copy that is not doctored, this is copy number 2, 3, 4, and having all agents at any level agreeing that this is what we got from the polling station and this is what we actually signed off on. So that is the first thing. And the second thing, I think that has been doing rounds maybe with my peers, is on election petitions. As we know, this is a very hotly contested election, and I know some people were going into polling booths and they were saying that apart from the president, I was getting a form and I'd choose a candidate, maybe based on their facial features, maybe based on if I like their name and what have you. So I know there's going to be a lot of...
we are still doing that.
I think the candidates have not yet also done enough to sell their manifestos and just to make people understand this is who I am as a person and this is what I aspire to achieve.
But when you went to Kakamega and you went to the village, did you hear anybody talking of a manifesto? Nobody votes on a manifesto. Do you even remember what the manifesto was saying in their first line?
No, none of them
You would
remembers.
as a legal person. But really, the voting bloc in this country, it's nothing to do with the manifesto.
Yeah, and that's why you'd
It's the last page the candidate made.
Yes. And by pitch, I think I know what you mean and you know what I mean.
Yeah, because it's defeatist to talk about where is your manifesto, and nobody's going to vote on that. Maybe the people in the city.
Yeah, correct.
But this is not the voting bloc that counts.
Yeah, and that's the issue because you find now that in Kakamega specifically there was no gubernatorial vote, then you'd find someone go in there and they would tick one for the president and then they would tick the first one, maybe probably on the rest, just to get done with or not to look as if they've come in to just tick one aspirant. So I know there's going to be a lot of also election petitions from this, specifically on now that there's a specific guideline on how the Form 34A should be filled, how it should be distributed in terms of carbon copies from the polling station level to the national level. And also I'd envision a situation where the election has been postponed in certain regions, that be petitions should the most popular candidate lose in a subsequent election, because then they would say, maybe there's an element of voter apathy because people have shied away from voting because it's not a holiday anymore, or they're mobilized, they came from different parts of the country, and now this is just being done in this region and they're not. So it'll be very interesting to see the new jurisprudence we'll be coming up with in terms of election petitions this time round, and especially by the younger advocates.
Looking at IEBC, and we're talking about the growth of democracy, do you feel that the things they're doing, the things they put in place, do you see them, do you feel like, yes, this is growth of democracy, or do you think it's just driven by the fear of, this is going to go to court, so let's be ready, cover your bases? So are they covering their bases, or is this something we can enjoy as democratic growth?
I mean, if we go by the second one and say they're covering their bases, then it works for us because we are enjoying, or I'd like to think at this moment we are enjoying much of it, because you look at the process from the polling station to the national level, it is very hard to tamper with whatever result comes out from that primary level. And now that we're saying photos are taken by smartphones, you're allowed to do that as a media person, as an observer, you'd be able to have your people around and you're able to just sort of guarantee the integrity of what was received from the lowest level all the way to the top level. So I'd like to think it is we progressing a democracy, and not really to say that they're just covering their bases.
But we need to move one step more so that we don't be the country that has its issues sorted out in court. We get a winner in court, and there are people voting. A lot of people are voting. Right. We need to get to a place where we just count and get a winner and it's done. How do we get there?
I mean, once, again, I think we are heading there, maybe the next 20 years, 30 years when I'll be running for president. I'll be running for president. We shall have gotten there, but we have come a long way. As you had indicated, I have voted a number of times, not a number of times, maybe 1 or 2 times, so I'm not that old. But just reading history books and figuring out from the previous constitution to the 2010 constitution, the transitions, the change we have seen, the progressiveness, I think we'll get there. Slowly but sure.
But still in your place, you can advise your family, you can advise your friends, and when you talk to them, what are the things they keep raising about this vote? When you went home, what did you hear them raising as a concern or as a place of happiness? What were they saying?
I mean, the biggest concern was, will this vote really count? As I've pointed out, is the fact that over the years, people have experienced a lot of disappointment where you wake up early, you go vote, and then you hear probably a polling station has more votes for candidate X than Y. And when they tally all the votes that have been casted, they even exceed the number of voters registered in that particular polling station. So a lot of questions were, I'm voting yes, but they'll steal like they normally do. Like they normally do. Yeah, so it is going to be a very maybe challenging thing that requires a collaborative effort for groups to just now sensitize the public that, look, IBC has really tried and they've put this and this in place. Please now go out there and vote.
What do you make of our prospective leaders, people who stand up to be elected? We've seen a lot of them running off to foreign countries. What are they trying to get from them? Are they trying to get them to support that they are chasing a democratic process? What exactly takes them out there before the vote?
I mean, you look at the position of Kenya in East Africa, and you realize that it is at a very strategic position for many foreign powers, foreign countries, such as the US, China, that is now a favorite. And you realize that these are the people we would most probably end up borrowing from. And so everyone would probably be going there to tell them, look, send your observers, probably we'd be able to borrow at this particular time, repay in this particular period. But I would not really delve into it because I'm not much of an expert into international law. But a lot of that happens because they want to seek the big brother sympathy, in my opinion.
Don't worry about international law because they tell us the same story. They bring it to Kakamega. They tell you I traveled. Why did he travel? Why did she travel? What do they tell people when they come to the ground?
I rarely hear any politician saying that I went to this place and I brought this. And I would be tempted to say that most of the time it's all about per diem and most probably just trying to utilize the money allocated to the office in terms of maybe international travel and all that in that regard.
Do we have lessons to draw from our previous election?
So when you talk about our previous election, do you talk about the 2017, the first election, the second election?
No, the last one we did.
Of course, we voted twice in 2017. So
what do we learn from that?
So we, first of all, learned that voter apathy is a thing. And we really need to move to that position of getting people out there voting in numbers because they trust that their votes will be counted at any given point.
Well, the things we look out for, there are things you're watching out for. And just before we go to the break, what would you tell the people who voted and now are going to sit tight and wait for the results? What should they look out for?
Yeah, actually, I tell them to just sit home, sit tight. This has not yet been tested in terms of the IBC's procedures that they've now put in place. Let's wait and see how it turns out, but let's have a little bit of faith.
Faith we shall have. We're taking a break. When we come back, we have a link at Bomas. When we come back, we speak some more to Philip. He tells his experiences. Your vote must count. See you for the break.